Hi, this is Amitabh. Uh, a short rabbit hole, possibly, I don't know. Hopefully, less than 15 minutes. Uh, I was talking to two friends of mine together, as in three of us were talking together. And we ended up speaking how stupid, I mean, completely stupid, uh, uh, the startup ecosystem in terms of its work culture is, right? Look, this is not to harangue them. This is not to say that they're idiotic, right? But this is instead to say, look, there's a deep appreciation of the risks a startup culture takes. There's a deep appreciation of the magic they create. There's a deep appreciation of the progress they bring. But there is, like any other situation or population in the world, the startup ecosystem is hugely impacted by the Pareto principle. So 80% of the startup ecosystem is 80% of the startup ecosystem is total rubbish, especially in terms of culture and not in terms of ideas or not in terms of their integrity or none of that. And the remaining 20% obviously gets the trick. And three of us were talking. I used to be part of startups, so I'm no expert, but the other two are still very much in startups even today. And we gave a lot of examples, right? So we gave a lot of funny, ridiculous examples. Like, so I had heard one example from a recent friend where uh, where their company or their organization was suggesting that anybody who comes into work after 11 in the morning uh, should lose half a day's worth of pay. And this is essentially a tech organization. This is not a services organization. This is not like a banking service desk where you have to be there at 9 because your customers are walking in at 9, right? This is a app ecosystem where, uh, yeah, unless you're part of customer support, which hopefully runs 24/7 or 16/7, uh, there is no time pressure. I mean, there's no immediate time pressure. There's a broader time pressure. There's a broader milestone that all of us respect and have to try and do something about. I found this whole thing very ridiculous and very strange. I mean, in a world like ours, in a world like today, when you put this sort of a criteria or a restriction, you're just you're inverse signaling, right? You're actually, instead of signaling that I am forward looking, you're saying, oh, I come from the 19th century. And more importantly, this is not about signaling, right? This is not about inverse or positive signaling, right? This is about doing the right thing. What's important for the work? What's important to get the job done? If we are an app that, let's say, is a music app, as in, let's say I'm Spotify, I'm making it up, right? What do I care about? That my customers download my app, my customers use my app, and my customers enjoy the app, and finally, hopefully, my customers pay for the app. And all of which I believe Spotify does beautifully, right? As an example. And as long as I'm meeting this, now whether my employee decides to work at 2 o'clock at night, of course, unless he or she is in a service job, as I said, but if he's a UI engineer, or if he's a database engineer, or if he's a data scientist, or he's a customer analytics uh, engineer, do we really care when he works, where she works, how she works? So that was one example. The other example was someone saying that, look, this person leads the function, and he was saying that when I give an estimate, he leads the function for the entire firm. So let's say he leads, I'm just making it up, he leads the finance. Let's say he's the CFO for the entire firm. Now he says that to do a futures contract on USD, So we are in India, so we work in the INR. And if you want to do a futures contract on USD, let's say he reports to the board that this will take 2 weeks. What this guy was describing was utterly funny. So he said that as soon as he gives this sort of an estimate, somebody walks up to an analyst in his team and says, look, can you do this faster, or can you do this in 2 days? And the analyst obviously has a lot more pressure and less items to prioritize, right? So he has more pressure because he's now speaking to the CEO or the board, and he or she is not seeing the entire picture, right? So he or she end up saying, yeah, we'll try. I mean, we can absolutely do this in 2 days. And then the board member walks up to the CFO, who we originally started this snippet with, and says, look, your team member says we can do this in 2 days. You had an estimate of 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Where are we missing the story? I find this kind of culture rampant within startups, and I say this from first-hand experience as well. And I find all of this very bizarre, right? So this is part of the rabbit hole we are going to talk about, right? There's just two quick things to cover in this rabbit hole. The first is, from my perspective, and again, like all other rabbit holes, this is just a meditation, right? This hopefully doesn't sound like Gyan at all. This is just a meditation and an exploration of what goes wrong, right? And maybe we can improve ourselves, and happy to share, happy to learn. I have come to realize that in any situation, human beings tend to measure what they can measure, which is already codified as Goodhart's law in the world. So there is Goodhart's law at work, where people only measure what they can measure. So if I can get my USD contracts done in 3 days, it's great. I will measure and I will chase it. I will not think about whether that helps my business, whether that's necessary for my business, and do I need to take pressure for it, right? I will not think about it, because I just want to show people on a metric that I can measure that I tried to hit the ball out of the park. Whether that metric is really important in the game you're playing is almost always, in all circumstances, including personal life, forgotten. Right. So we, for example, will tend to say, oh, but you were not nice to me on this day, as an example, right? But what you will forget at that point is maybe that person was going through a bad day, a bad moment, a bad experience himself or herself. What you have measured is your context. You have measured what the other person's response was. And because this was measurable, you tried to make it a milestone or an occurrence in the conversation. So that's one part of the rabbit hole, which means we measure what we can. The second part of the rabbit hole is what I call as the tyranny of being ephemeral, right? Most of us, wherever we are, whatever age we are, we don't think we're going to spend more than 10, 15, 20 years in the organization or the workplace or the situation we are in, right? So let's say I work for Microsoft. I'm just making it up. And let's say I'm 35. What do I really think? I think I will work in Microsoft till about 50, even if I am very committed and dedicated to Microsoft. And then post 50, either I'm going to do another gig or I'm going to retire. Either of those two. That's one part of the story, or that's one aspect of this situation. The second aspect of the situation is that let's say I have immense influence and power at Microsoft. Let's say I'm Satya Nadella's number 2. Let's say I'm his COO or whoever I am, right? So I will take a lot of decisions. I will obviously influence the firm at a deep level. But usually, unless you are truly, truly, truly driven from your depths, you usually know and assume that you're not going to be there for 15 years. And fuck, you don't even know whether the firm is going to be there for 15 years, right? That's the challenge. So, what I call this is the tyranny of uh, ephemeral, being ephemeral, right? So, we don't know whether the firm is going to be there. And we cannot think in those time scales. Like, we don't think that, oh, this firm, like Microsoft, could be around for another 50 years. And actually, in the case of Microsoft, there's a good chance Satya thinks that this is going to be around for 50 years. But let's take a regular startup, right? Most people are living in time frames of 6 months, year, 5 years at best. There is no concept of, oh, I will be around in 100 years and this firm, more than the firm will be around in 100 years and we have to still continue to do well. Because if you have that mechanism or mentality built into the culture, you will absolutely do very different things. So let's take an example, right? If I today sat in IBM, and I'm taking an example not to take a dig at IBM, just to illustrate a point. So I am a 300,000 people organization, which is IBM. I know I'm struggling against all the other tech giants, and I know my past has been glorious. How will I revitalize myself? I will first quickly recognize what are my challenges today. So I'm possibly bureaucratic, I'm possibly sluggish, and I'm possibly carrying a lot of dead weight around. How do I quickly become nimble, fit, healthy as an organization and run faster and faster ahead? These decisions will be hard and these decisions need to be taken. But as a CEO or as a COO or as a leader, will I take this? Because this to execute will take me 10 years. This to show results will take another 10 years, which means by the time I'm able to turn around IBM, let's say it's 10 years. Like Satya did it with Microsoft in about 5 years, right? And Satya is obviously a legend, or in the sense he truly is a turnaround artist. Let's say an IBM leader is not. So he or she is going to take 10 years. Versus, so am I going to do this? Am I going to invest my life and career into turning around a company, which is IBM, and know that I won't be around to, in the firm at least, to see the results? Because one, I don't know whether I have a 10-year tenure. Second, I don't know whether I am going to be able to execute this well. And third, if it works, yes, some people are going to hail me as a hero. If it even begins to fail, I'm going to be fired the next day or the next quarter. So the rewards are lopsided. There's an asymmetry here, right? So I have rewards for literally being dull or not taking risks. And I have punishments for doing anything which even remotely looks like the right thing, right? And that is again the tyranny of being ephemeral, right? There's no upside for me. So if I were to distill this down in my own head, and I often meditate on this, I really do meditate on this immensely. I mean, in my own work, in how the workplace I work is structured. So where I work, and this is not part of this conversation, is fabulously structured. They seem to have got a few basics around culture and science, great, but that's a separate conversation. Again, this is not a plug for them or an anti-plug for them. This is not about them at all. So one, the incentives for me to take a decision are very, very misaligned. Uh, when I am at IBM or when I am in most situations in my life, my incentives are hugely misaligned. And that kind of begins to show, right? Because I think if my incentives are misaligned, I end up usually taking short-term goals, which can be measured, Goodhart's law again, and try and deliver on it. The second is, I really don't, in general, this is the Pareto principle, right? In general, I usually don't have a great sense of belonging to any place because I know that the relationship itself is very ephemeral, right? Like, I know if I have a bad quarter, I'm gone. And again, I'm talking in the context of me being the CEO of IBM. And I also know that even if I'm not gone and even if I really slogged my life out, I'm just a quarter away from being thrown out. So how do I deal with this? How do I create a sense of belonging for IBM in my own head is very hard. So in a sense, this rabbit hole deals with two things or three things, right? One, in the Pareto world, the 80% of the world tries to only achieve what can be measured. Second, this creates a strange incentive problem, a very, very bizarre incentive problem. And third, this is also kind of hugely amplified by an ongoing belonging situation or a belonging problem. Why is this relevant? I think this is very true for most things in life, except when you have children or you have spouses or other similar circumstances. In most things in life, we are harassed by these exact same factors, right? I mean, and it takes a lot to break out of it. And that is my meditation, that is my rabbit hole, and that's why I brought it out here. I found the chat with my friends fascinating. It was a deeply revelatory chat, and again, like all rabbit holes, at some point we will revisit this again. So thank you. That's really it on this one. I'll try and wrap it up here, but think about this and do write in at amitabh.mwrh@gmail.com. Thank you all. It's a wrap.